Successful alpine skier, male or female ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
The Israel-Hamas war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
CBS Reports investigates why the war on drugs isn't working. Funding cartels. Tonight at 9:30 on the free CBS News app.
Talking about the same things. It's about unifying our conference, getting us back on track. There's a lot of work to do.
Well, we haven't seen him in years, and we know his record. His record is a horrible one. We're not worried at all about his testimony.
The race is actually wide open. I think there's 3 or 4 candidates that are clearly surging ahead. I'm a big believer that I think the third debate is going to be pretty critical.
Hello, I'm Weijia Jiang in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer has dropped out of the race for Speaker. House Republicans nominated him for the position just earlier today. He won against a crowded field of candidates after multiple votes behind closed doors. It's been 3 weeks since lawmakers voted to oust then-Speaker Kevin McCarthy. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now. Nicole, what is happening on the Hill? I mean, for a split second there, Tom Emmer was about to become a household name. It looked like he was making progress, and then all of a sudden, he's out.
Yeah, I don't know that we know the answer to this. I mean, look, this has been a very chaotic process. We did try to speak with Tom Emmer as he raced out of this hallway behind me. He did not speak at all to reporters when we asked him whether he was in the race or out of the race, but we have subsequently learned from members who were inside the room that he has withdrawn from this race. And this comes down to simply not having the votes, which has been the issue that has plagued just about every other person who has tried and failed to win the gavel. I spoke briefly with Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. I asked her if one of the deciding factors for her was the fact that Tom Emmer actually voted to certify the 2020 election, which many Republicans, including Greene, did not. And she said that did play a factor in her decision to oppose him. At the end of the day, there were about 10 to 20 members who were not backing Emmer. He spent several hours trying to talk to some of them. Obviously, it does not appear that he was successful if he has now made this decision to drop out. But certainly that vote certifying the 2020 election appears to be just one of several factors that some Republicans are citing for their opposition to him.
Nicole, certainly related to that, I want to ask you about the Trump factor, because the former president weighed in on Emmer and his potential
Majority Leader Scalise, can you please stop for a second? Sorry about that. That was just the Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, who was walking by. Obviously, we weren't able to get him to stop. We were trying. But, you know, he has tried to be optimistic about this process and said that, you know, they are trying to work through this. But, again, this begs some real questions about the Republican Party. You know, just last week I asked Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker who was ousted, who, you know, started this entire process, if the Republican conference was broken. And his answer, simply put, was yes. You know, and so I think this really is a moment where Republicans are going to have to do some soul searching here because, as one member put it to us earlier today, they've gone through their top 3. They've gone through Steve Scalise, who just walked past me. They have gone through Jim Jordan, who is considered a rising star, one of their top Republicans in the party. And they have also now gone through Tom Emmer, who's a number 3 Republican in the House. I do just want to bring in Congressman Dusty Johnson, who has actually been one of the brokers in some of these discussions as Republicans who have been trying to work through these various series of candidates. And Congressman, I just want to get your reaction first and foremost to Whip Emmer dropping out of this race.
Tom Emmer would have been a good speaker. He knows how to count votes. He knows how to listen to members. He knows how to put together a vision for a plan for a team that needs to move forward together. It's unfortunate. In the same way it was unfortunate that Jim Jordan had to get out and that Steve Scalise had to get out and that Kevin McCarthy was thrown out. These are all
But, sir, this is more than unfortunate. I mean, you don't have a leader, and you can't seem to agree on one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you and I can play the semantics game, you know, unfortunate, really unfortunate, terribly unfortunate, tragic. The bottom line is we just have to get a game plan moving forward. I mean, I'm frustrated, as every American should be. I think this reminds me how terribly irresponsible it was for the 8 chaos agents on my side of the aisle to work with 208 Democrats to put the House into this degree of absolute unpredictability. We're in a bad spot. Now, that being said, smart guys and smart gals need to roll up our sleeves. We need to quit complaining. We got to find a way through this darkness.
What is that game plan?
I think we need to remind everybody that until we can come to an agreement, the House is shut down. While the House is shut down, we can't secure the border. We cannot help our friend Israel. We cannot take care of Americans who have needs today. We cannot try to avoid a government shutdown, which is staring us in the face in just a few weeks. We have real work to get done, and unfortunately, too many people in that room are more comfortable saying no. They'd rather win the fight and keep us shut down than find a way forward.
And just yesterday, you told me you think the odds of a shutdown come November 17th is increasing based on this situation.
Yeah, shutdowns are stupid. They don't save any money. We're $33 trillion in debt. Clearly, we need a fiscal responsibility reset, and I backed a lot of mechanisms to get that done, some of them successfully. Most of the people who want to shut down the government say, oh, we need to do that to save money. It does not save a nickel. It costs us billions. And unfortunately, because Republicans in the House don't have a leader, we don't have a strategy for how to get conservative wins while keeping the government open.
In terms of the path forward, I mean, is now the time to maybe revert back to this idea of empowering Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry?
One concern is that to get that done, I think Democrat votes would be necessary. And there's not a lot of trust right now. I mean, this 3 weeks of chaos was done absolutely, first and foremost, by 8 hardline Republicans, some of whom love chaos, but they couldn't have done it on their own. But
do you need to start having those conversations with Democrats? I know they have indicated a willingness to work with Republicans.
Part of the issue is when you have Democrats who are willing to embolden some of the most extreme voices in our conference 3 weeks ago, can we trust them not to do the same thing a week from now or a week from then? There is not a lot of trust. They frankly have not shown a willingness to put the stability of the House over their own partisan ends. And until there is some trust built there, I think Republicans are going to continue to work to get to 217 votes inside that room.
And then just very quickly, yes or no, I know the former president put out a Truth Social post calling Whip Emmer a rhino. Do you think that is ultimately what broke his bid today?
When you have 221 Republicans and you have to get 217 votes, any more than 4 members can sink that speakership. And
but do you think the former president is to blame in this?
I don't know that it could help, right? But, Tom Emmer, he was making some progress. I do think the former President Trump's comments could not have helped.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman Dusty Johnson. Appreciate you for stopping. Weija, back to you.
Nicole, before I let you go, I have to ask what you think about the Trump factor, because, the congressman there wasn't willing to say that, yes, it was because of Trump, but the timing doesn't appear to be just coincidental. So can anyone win here if they don't have the support of the former president?
Yeah, well, it's a really double-edged sword if you think about it, Weija, because just last week the former president endorsed Jim Jordan, and it was a full-throated endorsement, and that was not enough to get him over the finish line. But yet, when he put out this Truth Social post criticizing him, and keep in mind the former president made clear just yesterday he was going to withhold his support, or he was going to wait for a while. But once he put out that Truth Social post, we did see the momentum start to change. And now, of course, Republicans down a third candidate in this race with a question of who, if anyone, will be next.
All right, Nicole, thank you. Love seeing you play with the live ball and bringing us the very latest from the Hill. All right, President Biden says aid is not getting into Gaza fast enough. The president spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday and brought up the need to keep humanitarian assistance flowing into the territory. Trucks of aid began moving into Gaza from Egypt on Saturday, but UN agencies say more is needed. I want to turn now to CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cortez, who joins us now. Nancy, it's great to see you. So the president was pretty clear today. He was blunt to say it wasn't happening fast enough in terms of aid flowing into Gaza, but it's not like the administration can flip a switch and turn that aid on. So what are they saying about trying to pick up the pace here?
Well, you're hearing universally from White House officials that they agree with the president. They don't think that the aid is moving fast enough. In fact, they said today no trucks made it into Gaza after the humanitarian effort began in earnest over the weekend. And that's for a variety of reasons, most notably the fact that it's a conflict zone. And so it's dangerous for those trucks and those drivers to get into Gaza and make sure that the food and water and medicine gets to the people who need it the most. And in fact, today, White House officials started embracing what they described as a humanitarian pause, which is exactly what it sounds like, a pause in the barrage of rockets from Israel so that there is time for this humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. They say that's very different from a ceasefire, which is something that Hamas has been pushing for in exchange for releasing more prisoners. They didn't go as far as to say that they are urging Israel to take this humanitarian pause, but they said it's something that they're open to.
Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke at the UN Security Council. Can you tell us more about what message he communicated about this crisis?
Yes, at the United Nations, Weija, he made the case that a broader conflict in the Middle East that starts to bring in other countries would be devastating, not just for Israel, not just for the Palestinians, but for the wider region. And he argued that Iran's proxies, these militant groups that are funded and encouraged by Iran, are increasingly targeting U.S. troops in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq and in Syria. And he urged any country with any leverage over Iran to push Iran to stop encouraging those attacks. This is a major concern, Weija, here at the White House. One of the biggest reasons that they're worried about the possibility of a ground invasion by Israel into Gaza, because they fear that that will only prompt terrorist groups, militant groups backed by Iran to increase their drone attacks and their rocket attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and in Syria.
And given those concerns, Nancy, I wonder what the White House is doing, if anything yet, to prepare for a bigger conflict there, because since day one, that is something President Biden has warned about, the very real possibility that this could spill over. And of course, there are so many Americans living in that region. So are they doing anything in case?
They're doing a lot. First of all, they are moving equipment, weaponry, ammunition into place. We know that they've moved several carrier strike groups into position, the Persian Gulf, into the Eastern Mediterranean. They're putting air defenses in place near these small U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq. And they've begun to make initial preparations for the possibility, they say it's just a possibility, but they need to be prepared, that thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Americans, in the worst case scenario, need to be evacuated from the region.
And Nancy, before I let you go, I want to end where we started the show, which is the paralysis on Capitol Hill, since you covered the Hill for so many years and now you're covering the White House. And I wonder what, the inability to elect a speaker does when it comes to the president's goals, especially when it comes to providing aid, not only in Israel, but to Ukraine, to other security issues. Just lay out what we're seeing on the Hill and why that is so impactful for President Biden.
Well, first of all, it's most importantly a major concern because they are looking to send a package of aid to Israel as quickly as possible. And that's something that they simply may not be able to do if a speaker is not in place in the House. There just isn't a mechanism to hold a vote and do that, as far as anyone knows. That's the biggest concern. But then beyond that, they are trying to show leadership in this crisis. They are trying to get allies behind them. And if the U.S. doesn't have its ducks in a row, if the U.S. can't count on a Congress that functions, that weakens the U.S. and makes it harder to rally other countries to its side.
That's right. And the world is watching as the president tries to bring America back and be a leader. So there is a lot of potential consequences of what we're seeing on the Hill. Thank you so much, Nancy Cortez.
You're welcome, Weijia.
But today in court, Donald Trump came face-to-face with his former attorney, Michael Cohen, for the first time in 5 years. We'll break down what he had to say about the former president's civil trial in New York. You are streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish
That
you and
we
I are going to
just-
have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Welcome back to America Decides. Michael Cohen testified as part of a civil fraud case against former President Trump and his company today. In the $250 million lawsuit, New York's Attorney General alleges Trump inflated his net worth in order to receive business and financial benefits. Trump has denied all the allegations. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now from outside the courthouse in New York. Robert, it's great to see you. What were some of your main takeaways from Cohen's testimony today? I mean, this is a man who used to be pretty much the former president's right-hand man.
Good to be with you, Weijia. Michael Cohen, Trump's longtime fixer, testified that Trump
in private conversations over the years, encouraged him and other Trump associates to inflate his assets, including his properties like Mar-a-Lago and Trump Tower, and that Cohen and others worked at Trump's behest to do exactly that, to fulfill what Trump wanted, which is to have his net worth move to a higher range. At one point, Cohen testified today that Trump thought his net worth was $4.5 billion, but it really felt like $6 billion. And he wanted his aides and advisors to make sure that all of his financial statements got to that $6 billion number.
Well, during a break, Trump himself spoke briefly about seeing Cohen again. Let's take a listen and connect with you on the other side.
How did it feel to see Michael Cohen again? I haven't seen him in years, and you know his record. His record is a horrible one. All you have to do is ask the Southern District of New York. He's got a horrible record, but they're just starting. But you'll see how it ends up. What about his testimony? It's not going to end up very good for him. What about his testimony? We're not worried at all about his testimony.
Well, it's no surprise that Mr. Trump is not holding back, but I wonder how his presence inside the courtroom changes things, if at all.
Well, it's interesting to sit there in the courtroom, as I did today, for a few hours, to watch the former president as he interacts with his lawyers. He can't say anything in the courtroom, and for Trump, that's an unusual circumstance, to not be able to speak out, someone who is so often in public life, someone who is giving his opinion in many different ways, whether it's in a social media post or in a rally speech. Here in the courtroom, he has to be quiet. But he does shrug his shoulders. Sometimes he throws his hands in the air. But he does it in a way so he doesn't cause a disruption. So it's a very muted appearance by Trump. But he did not ever seem to look at Cohen much. They did not have much eye contact from what we could tell here at CBS News. Instead, it was more of an icy tension in the room about what was unfolding as Cohen detailed all of this alleged fraud.
All right, Robert Costa, thank you again for joining us. 2024 candidates are stumping in the early primary states. We'll bring you to Iowa and New Hampshire next. You're streaming America Decides.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the $1 million question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
What Donald Trump does now, he is wedded to the teleprompter. He can't get off that teleprompter. Anytime he does, he says things like, don't vote. He's telling people not to vote, like we have all the votes we need. Really? Like, wait a minute, you lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Ron DeSantis with some tough words for Donald Trump while in New Hampshire. Meanwhile, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott is shifting nearly all of his campaign's focus to Iowa. Torian Small and Aaron Navarro join us now. Torian is a CBS News campaign reporter who is in Iowa with Tim Scott's campaign, and Aaron is a CBS News political reporter in New Hampshire with the DeSantis campaign. Aaron, thanks for being with us today. I want to ask you about his message, because we saw he was standing right there with Governor Chris Sununu. What was their plea to voters?
Well, the plea, at least from DeSantis' side, is that he can take Trump's promises and actually fulfill them. And it's an approach to really tap into what his campaign and other non-Trump candidates see as soft support for Trump. People that, know him, they know his name, they're voting for him in the polls because it's the name they recognize, but they could still be swayed by these other candidates. Take a listen to some of the voters I've met at these DeSantis events and asked about Trump.
I think I made the decision, I think, before the legal issues that came out. But, even factoring them in now, if I thought about it and factored them in, it's really going to be it's a no-brainer for me. I mean, he's got this issue in this state, this issue in that state, and we need somebody that's going to be full-time concentrating on the problems that we're having.
My problem with wanting to, he's older too, he's 78. I think we need to turn the baton over to younger people. I think, unfortunately, it's going to end up being Trump, but I'm praying.
So I'm running into voters that have this sense of Trump fatigue, which may not necessarily match when you see polls that show him with 49, 50%. But it's mostly of people that are at DeSantis events, so people already curious enough to check out a non-Trump candidate.
And Torian, what about in Iowa? I mean, Tim Scott, he's betting big there. He's spending a lot of time there. Do you think that it's working for him, especially in getting out of the former president's shadow?
Yeah, Weijia, it's Iowa or bust for Senator Tim Scott. He really leaned into making this his top priority. His campaign announced yesterday that they're, putting all of their resources into this state, doubling their ground game. And he confirmed yesterday, Tim Scott, that is, confirmed yesterday to CBS News that he's pulling out all of his campaign funds from other states to really prioritize the Hawkeye state. And part of the reason why he's doing that is because he sees the evangelical voting bloc here as crucial to his campaign success. I've been to quite a few events today, and faith was, embedded, deeply weaved into his policy messaging here, and it played well with voters out here as well. One thing that I do want to mention, he talked about immigration and, taking out whether or not to take in Palestinian refugees. He says he's against that. But he also mentioned, curiously, Chinese students studying in the United States. He says that colleges, universities should have a deeper vetting process. Taking a listen to what he said here.
This is not necessarily the most popular thing I'm going to say, but just know we sometimes have to agree to disagree without being disagreeable. We have 300,000 Chinese students on college campuses across this country. I am concerned that we are more interested in their tuition than we are to whether they're reporting back to the Chinese Communist Party. I think we should do a better job of understanding who we're allowing on our college campuses.
Torian, is he getting any pushback on those? Is he getting any pushback on those remarks?
What makes that? what makes that comment so curious is that he's talked about the Chinese Communist Party before, how the United States should focus on competition with them. He never really framed it as an issue between students, especially Chinese students, and America. Now, in terms of pushback, the folks here at this event in Creston, Iowa, applauded that line, essentially endorsing what he had to say about it. As we know, CCP versus the United States has been a big issue on the Hill, and now it's starting to bleed into the trail.
And I know that both candidates are making the conflict in Israel a big issue, too. Aaron, I wonder today, did we hear anything more from DeSantis about how he says he would make decisions with regard to the Israel conflict?
So he was asked essentially at what line and if he thinks the U.S. should delay the military forces from Israel. And he said, that's a strategic thing. I want to make sure the hostages are taken out. But I also asked him, he has also floated, taking away visas from international students that he says, quote, demonstrate with Hamas. And I asked him, is that something you would do retroactively? And he kind of doubled down on it, saying that it is something that he would make part of his foreign policy as president.
And Torian, what about Senator Scott? Did he also mention the conflict and how he would handle it? I know he's already introduced at least 2 pieces of legislation.
Absolutely. Kind of along the same lines Aaron is saying out there. Tim Scott has brought up the idea of punishing colleges or universities that endorse or just simply allow anti-Israel protests to happen on campus. In terms of support for Israel, he says that, like we've heard from other GOP candidates, that he stands with Israel and he supports them doing everything they can to erase or wipe Hamas off the face of the earth.
All right, Torian Small and Aaron Navarro, we will be following your work as all of these candidates sharpen their both foreign and domestic policy goals. Thank you for joining us today. And that does it for us. Thanks for watching. You are streaming CBS News.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to